The Pittsburgh Steelers have re-signed Teryl Austin as defensive coordinator. Is that the right move? We'll discuss that as well as more additions to the offensive coordinator search and what the Steelers should be looking at offensive coordinator and our playoff picks all here in the Friday edition of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel, make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 back in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, y'all. So obviously no Jenna Harner today. Unfortunately, schedules kind of got in the way. Both of us are pretty busy people. So sometimes things happen. She'll be back on next week. We'll see her then. But we have a lot to talk about. One, the Steelers did re-sign Teryl Austin, which we talked about earlier this week. And we were asking, would that be the right move? And as I said then, I don't see why it wouldn't be. And if you're complaining about this move, as some people were on social media, and I think that there's some reasonable Steelers fans out there who were like, you know what, like defense, maybe it could have been better, but this guy was pretty good. Can't be too mad at that. And that's pretty much how I feel about it. And it's not just good. The defense was top 10 this year. They were 6th in scoring, which is what you ask, is to keep points off the board. And they were 6th in scoring in a year where they had no offense. The Steelers scoring offense ranked 28th. Possessing the football, they were 20th in time of possession. They weren't a good offense. They kept putting the defense in bad spots, and they kept answering. On top of that, dealing with all the injuries that they dealt with. And that's not an excuse. That's an acknowledgement that they were able to still be ranked 6th at the end of the year on points allowed, because that's the bottom line. And as y'all remember, there was that clip when Mike Tomlin, I asked him about receiving yards allowed to receivers, and he's like, I don't care about who gets what yards. All I care about is we keep people out the end zone and keep points off the board. And that worked this year. And if you're sitting there saying, well, maybe Chris, that won't work 2 years in a row. Well, it did last year because they finished top 10 in the NFL in scoring defense last year. In a year, they were missing half of the season without TJ Watt. And this year, you could say they missed more than half of missing 2 of their big 3, or at least one of their big 3 defensive players. A lot of people are going to say, well, yeah, Teryl Austin. He should be a top 10 defense because the Steelers have the most expensive defense in the NFL. A lot of people always bring that up, but then they always seem to not bring it up when you acknowledge, wait a minute. How much of that expensive defense was on the field? Like for all those games that TJ Watt missed last year, that's $30 million. So if you take that away from their defensive costs, they're not even in like the top half of the league in how much a defense costs. This year, you look at Minkah Fitzpatrick and Cam Hayward, how much time they missed on top of all the other players who missed, and the practice squatters they had to keep bringing in at safety, the linebackers they had to keep bringing in from the practice squad, all the injuries they dealt with, and they still were top 10. They have, in the last 2 years, the Steelers have been a top 10 defense consistently, and in that time, they have never had their big 3 playing at fully healthy, all together, all killing it for them, because that's where a lot of people go to when they say, well, Teryl Austin doesn't do a lot, or it's not the coaching on defense that's helping anything. Well, really? Because if it's just the splash plays, if it's just the huge plays of the superstars that they're paying, where were the superstars? Because Cam Hayward had like 2 sacks in the season. Minkah Fitzpatrick didn't have a single interception. Yes, TJ Watt led the league in sacks, and that was great. And he's the defensive player of the year. That's why you pay him that money. But a whole defense doing this consistently, you don't get that from a defense that's poorly coached or even mediocrely coached. And that's where I think people have to sit back and acknowledge, like, hey, Teryl Austin is doing a doggone good job. And now teams are hiring from under Mike Tomlin and Teryl Austin, because Gerard Alexander is now going to be the safeties coach for the Raiders, and he was an assistant defensive backs coach for the Steelers this past year. So I think people are recognizing the Steelers are doing good things on defense, and it's the things that I talked about. Yes, there's complaints I have about Teryl Austin. I think that they need to get back to using Minkah Fitzpatrick as the robber and the primary free safety who can be the X factor in the middle of the field, jump whatever passes he needs to jump, and be the turnover machine that he's been in his best years. But at the same time, they also disguised a ton of coverages throughout the year. And for the most part of it, in doing so, they were on point. The communication breakdowns, they happen like they happen to every single defense in the NFL at some point, but they also were limited. And that's part of why the Steelers defense was ranked so high at the end of the year. They were able to make plays in the crucial moments when they were needed to make them. That's been the MO of the Pittsburgh Steelers defense since time immemorial. You can give up yards if you want, but you're gonna keep them off the scoreboard. And there was a time when you could be the number one defense and everything, but that's just so much harder to do nowadays, and especially with the new rules in the NFL. It's very rare that a team consistently can be number one in total defense and just total yards, and number one in scoring defense, and do it by dominating with such lengths. Offenses are going to figure you out. Mismatches are going to happen, and especially when injuries besiege your defense, the way that this Steelers defense has dealt with it over the past 2 years. Because again, it's not just this year with needing Patrick Peterson to play safety and Miles Killebrew and Eric Rowe and Miles Jack coming out of retirement and all those things. It was last year too when they were missing TJ Watt and they needed the whole defense to step up without him. And even when he was back, he obviously wasn't 100% because he wasn't crushing everything in his path. That's just a reality. And again, you have to acknowledge, if you're being objective, you don't have to, you can be unobjective, you can be whatever you want. But if you're being objective, you have to acknowledge that takes good coaching work and that takes good effort on the part of the planning to make sure that defense is still out there and performing. And that's why the Steelers have been able to stay above 500, is because their defense has been performing. And again, it's just the last 2 years for Teryl Austin. I think you look at that and you say, okay, it's been pretty good, for that. In the year before him, in 2021, the Steelers defense ranked 20th and 24th, 20th in points and 24th in yards. Last year, top 10 defense in points allowed. This year, sixth defense in points allowed. So I think the Steelers defense, you still want to make additions. And again, this is with only a rookie cornerback and Joey Porter Jr. as your only pillar at cornerback. Imagine if this team does reinvest at corner, gets a really high draft pick there, or goes and gets a L'Jarius Sneed and puts them across from Joey Porter. And imagine that linebackers don't get depleted, and Minkah Fitzpatrick is back to playing in superstar mode, and Cam Hayward plays the whole season healthy. Because remember, even when he came back, he told us after the season he was not fully healthy. He needed to be able to rest, and he didn't get able to. Imagine all those things click for you the next year, and you don't deal with as many injury problems. I think this defense would be a lot better in those situations, especially with the way they've been coached over the past couple seasons under Teryl Austin. I think bringing back Teryl Austin was the right move. And hey, maybe there's an innovative mind out there that could be better, but you don't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the Steelers defense is not broke. We got to get into the offensive coordinator search, because there's another name in the search, and it looks like there's going to be another interview that should be announced sometime soon. Might even be announced by the time you're hearing this show. But we'll get into all those names here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you that this show is brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Sometimes we all need opportunities to get things off our chest, whether they're big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. So today, I want to say how I really feel about something, and you might even be thinking about the same thing this week. Personally, I'm getting tired of y'all calling everything mediocre. If something's top 10, it's mediocre. If you don't win a Super Bowl, it's mediocre. That ain't mediocre. Mediocre is having a losing season, consistently, is finishing with 7 or 6 wins. That's mediocre. That's what that is. And here we have to deal with it all the time. But you know where I kind of vent that out? I don't vent that out on y'all on the show. I vent it out to a good therapist. And that's where BetterHelp Therapy Online can help you vent your frustrations out. If you think that the Steelers are mediocre, talk to your therapist about it. They'll help you. That's where BetterHelp Therapy comes in. You can get anything off your chest in a while. You may hate me for saying that on the show, but tell it to your therapist, and BetterHelp Therapy is the best place to go get one of those therapists. Go give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. We're also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America, with the conference championship weekend right here. You too can win big with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 back in bonus bets with any $5 money line bet guaranteed. You don't have to win. You don't have to lose. All you have to do is put $5 down on a money line bet. Say you're betting the Ravens or the Chiefs or the Lions or the Niners, and you get $150 back in bonus bets right on the FanDuel Sportsbook app that you can download right to your phone. And those are good for anything, whether you wanted to use on spreads, player props, over-unders, parlays. All of it is available with the bonus bets money that you're getting with this amazing offer. And when you download the FanDuel Sportsbook app, you'll be able to do all those things. Live same-game parlays. They have a new Bet Explore tab that allows you to find all the best bets you want to make. They also have a Make a Parlay hub where you can find the best options to build your crazy 12-leg parlay. I've got an 8-leg parlay that I can go over with you guys in a little bit here. But the app is super easy to use to bet on spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're getting back into the coaching decisions now. And this is now back into the offensive coordinator search. So we do have a new name since our last discussion. After I recorded with Mike DeFable for Thursday, Thomas Brown was thrown into the mix. And Thomas Brown is a guy who didn't have a good track record as an offensive coordinator in his first season last year. He was thrown into being the offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers. Went in, they had the fewest yards in the NFL and the second fewest points in the NFL. Their offense was worse than Matt Canada's offense. And so you're probably thinking, wait, why are the Steelers talking to that guy? That makes absolutely no sense. Hold your horses. Everything that I've taken some time because I thought the same thing when I was doing just a plain check. I was like, I don't know much about this guy. Let me do this. But doing some research, talking to people who know about Thomas Brown, he's a bit more respected, and a lot of people in the NFL are understanding what went down in Carolina that kind of put him in a tough position. For example, apparently a lot of what going down in Carolina wasn't even about Thomas Brown because he wasn't allowed to call the plays. It was good. It was down to the head coach. David Tepper was putting pressure on the staff to try to figure things out in a tough time. When you go back and you see how things were handled with the Panthers, it was a chaotic mess when you looked at how they worked. And when you looked at Frank Reich, their head coach, he had the play calls, then eventually he handed off to Thomas Brown, then he took him back from Thomas Brown throughout the season. So it's tough for an offensive coordinator to say like, hey, this is my resume when you didn't call the offense, then you were told to call the offense, then you were relieved of calling the offense before you could even get things going. And people that I talked to said in the parts of the seasons when Thomas Brown started calling the offense, they started to get a little bit better. They were still pretty bad. They still have a bad offensive line, a rookie quarterback, not a lot of playmakers, on offense. That's a tough position to be in. So I've been urged by people who are closer to the Panthers team than I am that Thomas Brown is still very much a viable person that you could look at in the coaching realm. But here's my counter to maybe it not being about him, because one, I've heard that Thomas Brown's best attributes are very Tomlin-esque type of things, and that he's a leader of men. He leads a room. He's motivating. He does those things, but it's more about that than about schematics on the offensive side of the ball and gearing up an offense to be top tier. But this guy does come from the Sean McVay tree, which a lot of people look at and you wonder there. And he coached running backs. He was an assistant head coach and coached tight ends while he was with the Rams in 3 years before he was with the Panthers. And that's a good thing. You like that. You want to see the Sean McVay tree. But here's the thing that I have to ask about that. If you are looking for your next offensive coordinator, are you looking for another guy, a coordinator who specializes in running backs and tight ends, or do you want a coordinator who specializes in quarterbacks and getting the passing game going? Because you know what? I think the Steelers are going to draft a couple more offensive linemen, or at least add another couple more offensive linemen in this offseason. And then this run game is probably ready to take off as is. And I think they should keep Eddie Faulkner and, maybe even Pat Meyer. We'll see about if they bring back Mike Munchak. We don't know if that's going to be a thing, but maybe it is. We'll wait to see what happens there. But But, the run game, I think, will work itself out. You need an offensive coordinator to come in and put their fingerprints in the passing game to either fix Kenny Pickett, work with Mason Rudolph, or work with whoever is going to be your starting quarterback next year to make them have a decent passing offense. Because again, if the Steelers have a decent passing offense, I mean, just middle of the league, that's all we were talking about all season long. If the offense is middle of the league, the Steelers, if the passing offense is middle of the league, the Steelers team is so much better of a team. They finished 13th in rushing this year. They had the 11th most rushing touchdowns, but when it came to passing, they had 25th most passing yards, the 30th most passing touchdowns. Those are numbers that if they're just boosted to the middle part of the league, this team becomes that much more formidable. That's why you might want to go get a offensive coordinator who's coming from coaching quarterbacks less than running backs and tight ends. And again, that's no knock on Thomas Brown. It's not saying that he can't do the job and he shouldn't get an offensive coordinator everywhere. I'm just not sure if that's the specialty the Steelers want to rely on. And who knows? Maybe he's an unknown quarterback guru, and we'll find that out. But I still think that of the people that we know that have been interviewed, Zach Robinson would be still my top bet for who should be the OC and what should happen there. But we also are hearing rumors that there's going to be another announced interview soon. Not that it's going to happen, but that it's going to be another big name offensive coordinator candidate out there, and that's where I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. Is who else gets the nod to get into these interviews? We talked with Alan Saunders. He brought up Darrell Bevell, who's been coaching the quarterbacks for the Dolphins. He's on the older side. Eric Bieniemy, we've brought him up multiple times here and what he's doing with Washington, but he needs to be able to come free to be able to do that. But the obvious other names out there that everyone wants to know is Clint Kubiak, who's working with the Niners. He's their passing game coordinator or specialist or whatever his official title is. But Clint Kubiak, if he's brought in, can he be the offensive coordinator? Can he be the guy that gets things going? They've talked to Cliff Kingsbury. There's other names out there. Some Steelers fans remember Byron Leftwich, and that he might be on the list. I brought up Kellen Moore on the show, and for what he did with the Cowboys before being brought to the Chargers this past year. Arthur Smith, who was the head coach of the Falcons, and didn't go over well for him there. But obviously, as an offensive coordinator before that, he was respected for what he did in Tennessee, and of course also Alex Van Pelt, the recently fired Browns offensive coordinator, and a guy who kind of got things going for the Browns offense at times, even with the struggles that they've had throughout the past few years. So there's plenty of options there. But to me, again, the Steelers, it comes down to picking a person who knows how to work with quarterbacks and knows how to develop them and develop a passing game and the synergy in a passing offense. And if you get that guy, then maybe you can get another guy in under them who's really good at working on the run game and helping develop that in other ways, or helping develop other parts of this offense. But to me, the priority, the ultimate goal needs to be finding your next offensive coordinator who is into modern offenses, who knows how to make things simpler for game managing type quarterbacks. And I think that would be the first step to seeing if Kenny Pickett can be the guy for you. And if he's not, oh well, you move on. But you need to give him a more organized, focused room with a better coordinator. That's going to be the first step. We'll see who else the Steelers announce or we see reported that the Steelers are set to interview to conclude this search. We'll have a lot more on that as that continues, but we got to take one more break. When we come back, I'm going to go over all the playoff games the two playoff games this weekend. Who might win? We'll find that out. We'll talk about that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. It's the best daily fantasy sports platform in North America with the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, or including pros and sharks and people that you don't know, you have no idea how they're winning, all you're doing is betting against PrizePicks. You're just working against them. All you're saying is saying more or less than for 2 to 6 player projections, and that's it. You can watch your winnings roll in if you're just right on saying more or less on some stat projections. PrizePicks is the fun new daily fantasy game that everyone needs to start playing right now. They have basketball options here and a special leagues that allows you to combine players from multiple sports. Like, for example, Travis Kelce, LeBron James, are they going to combine for over 10.5 3-pointers made and receptions over this weekend? We'll find out. And the place you can find that you can make money off of that is on PrizePicks. PrizePicks also has a reboot policy where your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For NFL games moving forward, all you have to do is pick a player. If they end up getting injured, that player is rebooted, and PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. PrizePicks, download the PrizePicks app today or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. When you get there, use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're not going to do grades today. We're going to take a look at the playoff picture and keep an eye on what happens there, and just give you my thoughts on the conference championship games. We'll get back to doing grades and such next week when we return on the show. But let's get into this and see how this is playing out right now, because I think it's going to be very interesting to see how these two games play out. I think one game you kind of have a David versus Goliath element there. The Niners, who have just been dominant all year and everyone's had them as a favorite and all those types of things. And then you have the Lions, who, they're not just happy to be there, but their fans are like, buddy, we ain't never been to the NFC Championship in my life. I don't know what to do with ourselves right now. And you feel like that's something to definitely root for there. Now, want to give a shout out to everyone that's been playing our bracket challenge on ESPN. We had the Pigskin Bracket Challenge. If you joined originally, we have over 120 people who joined us. Thank you so much for doing that. The number one person right now is TF Picks, who is in first place. They've been right on pretty much every pick so far. They've got the Ravens winning it all. We'll see how that plays out. I'm ranking way back in the middle at 63. So shout out to all those people that had them out there. Though we see some of y'all out there chose the Steelers. Don't know what y'all was thinking. I told y'all not to do that stuff, but y'all did it anyway. Hey, it's all right. Y'all are true diehard fans. But let's get into these two games. First, we'll go to the NFC, because I think that's the one that is, I think there's some elements there. The Niners are 7-point favorites according to FanDuel Sportsbook. By the way, FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. Download the app today. But you look at FanDuel right now, the Niners are 7-point favorites. The money line is minus 360 for them, plus 290 for the Lions, with the over-under at 51.5. And I look at that and I'm like, dang, like, that Vegas and FanDuel, they're seeing this as that bad of a situation, like for the Lions, a full touchdown underdogs. And it's kind of crazy, right? Because the Lions, they were 12-5 this year. They beat the Chiefs. They've been a good team. And it just seems like, oh wow, they don't deserve to be in this conversation. I think they do. Now, granted, they've had some tough losses this year. They lost to the Bears by 15 at one point. They got beat down really badly by the Ravens at one point. But I look at this team and I think, man, they can figure some things out. And if they are able to run the football, if they're able to get Jahmyr Gibbs going, and if Sam Laporta is getting, they have a lot of weapons to test the Niners defense. That could be interesting. I think the Niners are going to win this game. But if you're a betting person, I would take the Lions to cover. I think they keep this within a touchdown. It's a very close game. You saw how the Niners played in the last playoff game with the Packers. I thought that was a very interesting game. They were only 3 points away from, they only won by 3 against the Packers team that I thought they should have really demolished. That might be the open door for the Lions to take advantage of some mistakes. Aiden Hutchinson can get after this thing. Brian Branch has been really good in the secondary. Cameron Sutton's been there. Maybe they can get some mismatches. Maybe they can force some mistakes from Brock Purdy and get things going in San Francisco for the Lions to take over. But I'm still taking the Niners. They're the team I had picked to win the Super Bowl this year in the bracket challenge. I'm kind of wavering though, because the way they're playing, as far as week by week, I might not be picking them to win the Super Bowl, but I'll take the Niners to win, but I'm taking the Lions to cover here. I just think that they're in a good position to make this a really close game. And especially when you look at how they've played versus, how the Niners have played. I thought the Lions had a very convincing win over the Buccaneers. That was a really solid effort there. They won by 8 against a team that I think had been playing very well, and I think had more elements to their defense than, like, say, the Packers did this year. So I kind of look at that and I think there's a chance there. But let's look at the AFC real quick, because I'm sure that's where everyone wants to talk about right now. The AFC is a very interesting situation, because you could say either team should be the favorite. Now, according to FanDuel, the Ravens are the favorite. They're 3.5 point home favorites. -200 is the money line for them. +168 is the money line for the Chiefs. Over under set at 44.5. The thing is about these teams, both of these teams got good defenses. And I mean, really good defenses. Defenses that you're going to be like, dang, like this. I thought this was supposed to be about the elite quarterbacks, and it ends up being about the defenses and the total units that they play. And I said this at the beginning of the season, or not the beginning. I said this in the middle of the season. I was like, hey, like, I think the Chiefs defense is a problem. And that's going to be the unit that carries things. In fact, the Chiefs have the number 2 defense, both in points allowed and yards allowed this season. The Ravens have the number 1 defense in points allowed. They're number 6 in yards allowed. But this is going to be a really tight matchup. And these are 2 amazing quarterbacks, in my opinion. I know that there's some Steelers fans that don't like Lamar Jackson, call him a running back and all that. That dude is amazing. I give him his due for what he does in the NFL. Yes, the Steelers seem to have his number, but he does a great job. And I look at these 2 teams and I think, man, the Ravens are coming off absolutely destroying the Texans. The Chiefs are coming off of barely eking it out because of a missed field goal against the Bills. And that shouldn't determine everything, but man, and that was a road game. The Chiefs are there. I think there's one big factor to this game that would make me turn away from the Ravens. I'm picking the Ravens to win this. I picked them in the top of picked them to make the Super Bowl in my bracket challenge at the start of the playoffs too. But the big thing here is, can Patrick Mahomes do Patrick Mahomes stuff? Shout out to Bomani Jones. I love his The Right Time podcast. He's been pointing this out. He's like, Mahomes is the closest thing we didn't see to Jordan. And because that dude's a killer no matter what's going on the field. And that was something that I thought the Steelers like would work against the Chiefs if at a certain spot. Like if they faced up against the Bills, like I thought if the Steelers played the Chiefs in the first round, they would have a decent chance because of the way that the Chiefs' weapons have been struggling and how that limits Patrick Mahomes' production. It ain't done that, and that's not good for the Ravens in this situation. You look at Patrick Mahomes. They've been able to have over 200 passing yards in both of their playoff wins, and not in ways that were just excessive throwing the ball. They've been more balanced. They've been finding ways to work in Isaiah Pacheco. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been making plays. It's been solid, and that has to be acknowledged. The Chiefs are doing things right. But I just look at this Ravens team, and it's so complete from top to bottom. And it's another testament to when the Steelers beat them, when they rolled out their starters. It was a real win. I don't care about flukes or drop passes. You know what? The Steelers drop passes. Kenny Pickett misses open touchdowns. The Steelers went on a field and beat the Baltimore Ravens with Lamar Jackson, with Roquan Smith, with all the different players that they had, and they played well in that game. But the Ravens, when you look at them, the reason they're so tough is because they're so good top to bottom. Their defensive line's gotten all pro on it. Matabuike. Their linebackers are maybe the best 1-2 punch at linebacker in Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. Roquan Smith, a lot of people showed stat comparisons, and it's very similar to Ray Lewis, and that's a crazy thing when you see those type of numbers. I've always appreciated Roquan Smith, even when he was coming out of college at Georgia. The secondary is low with Marlon Humphrey. Geno Stone, is playing very well at safety. Kyle Hamilton's been on fire. Lamar Jackson, even if he doesn't get Mark Andrews back, Isaiah Likely's been a problem at tight end. Zay Flowers has really stepped up. This is a group that has so many different ways to beat you. The Chiefs, their defense has talented guys on it. But I don't know. I think the problem is that the Chiefs don't have enough different playmakers outside of Travis Kelce who can be dynamic to help them win this game the way that Lamar Jackson has different weapons that he can use on his side of the field. And I think the Ravens defense ends up edging out the Chiefs defense as a better one, and that shit sets up Ravens-Niners, a rematch in the Super Bowl. Now, let it be known, I'm hoping the Lions win the Super Bowl. That'd be the greatest story ever. I have several Lions friends who are Lions fans. That would be awesome, an awesome story to tell and to watch. But just my heart says, I think, the Lions would be great. It would be great to pull it out. but my brain's telling me it's going to be Ravens Niners. Let me know what you think in the comment section on YouTube. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, here on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes. We'll be back here Monday right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.